Have you ever found yourself just standing there completely frozen, just staring at a pile of unsorted mail on your kitchen counter?
Oh, I think we all know that pile.
Right. You know the exact pile I mean. It's like a mix of bills, maybe some credit card offers, maybe a wedding invitation from a cousin you haven't spoken to in 3 years.
And you just look at it.
Exactly. You just look at it, and instead of just sorting it, which takes maybe 2 minutes, you are struck by this profound, almost paralyzing sense of dread.
It is a very real, visceral feeling.
It really is. Or maybe this scenario feels a little more familiar. You are lying in bed, the lights are off, you are staring at the dark ceiling, and your brain is just forcefully replaying a conversation from earlier in the afternoon.
The classic midnight replay.
Yes, a conversation where you apologized like 3 separate times to a coworker for absolutely no logical reason.
You weren't at fault at all.
Not at all. You were just existing in the same room, but the sorries just fell out of your mouth. And as you lie there, you just think to yourself, why do I keep doing this?
Like, why can't I just process a piece of mail?
Right. Why can't I let a conversation go without it feeling like some sort of high-stakes emotional hostage situation?
It is an exhaustingly universal human experience.
No.
And it is something that brings so many people a really deep sense of quiet shame.
Yeah. Shame is a huge part of it.
It is. We lay awake analyzing our reflexive apologies, or we walk past that physical pile of mail every single day, and the mental weight of it just, slowly drains our battery.
It totally drains you.
And it feels like a personal failing. It feels like, well, we're just not disciplined enough or perhaps not confident enough.
Exactly. It feels like a character flaw. But today, we're going on a deeply fascinating mission to figure out exactly why that happens, and spoiler alert, it is definitely not a character flaw.
Far from it.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today we are exploring an absolute treasure trove of psychological research, clinical observations, and neurological studies that connect three things that seem entirely unrelated on the surface.
And those are
Our physical clutter, our social anxieties, and our sometimes desperate, exhausting need to please other people.
is such a powerful connection.
It really is. The core idea we are unpacking today, and it is a really profound one, is that so much of our daily suffering actually stems from a hidden, desperate attempt to control our internal world and our physical environment.
Just so we can feel a fleeting sense of safety.
Yes, exactly. Just to feel safe.
That is the absolute crux of the human condition in the modern world. Safety. I mean, we tell ourselves these narrative lies, right?
I realize.
Well, we think we're just trying to be a, highly organized person, or we think we are just trying to be a good, accommodating friend.
Right, polite labels.
Exactly. But underneath those polite labels, there is a primal survival mechanism running the show.
And to truly understand the sheer depth of this, to really get into the psychological mechanisms, the brain science, and the emotional blueprints at play, well, I am relying heavily on your expertise today.
I am so ready to get into it.
Awesome, because you are going to be explaining the why and the how behind these behaviors. My role here is to guide this journey, to connect the dots, and to act as the proxy for you, the listener.
It's going to be a great dynamic.
I think so too. I'm going to be pushing back, asking the clarifying questions, and probably admitting to a few of my own ridiculous habits along the way.
We all have them.
We do, because when you look at these clinical concepts side by side, it is absolutely mind-blowing how interconnected a cluttered garage is with like a fear of setting boundaries.
I am thrilled to dive into this with you. The connections between how we manage our physical space and how we manage our interpersonal relationships are incredibly profound.
I can't wait to hear how it all links up.
Honestly, once you see the underlying mechanism of control, you cannot unsee it. It changes the way you view literally every interaction.
Okay, let's unpack this right from the origin point. Where does this relentless, exhausting need for control actually begin?
That is the perfect place to start.
Like, if we are meticulously organizing our spaces or over-apologizing to coworkers just to feel safe, when did we start feeling so fundamentally unsafe?
Right.
Take us all the way back to the early days of human development.
Well, it begins exactly where most complex psychological frameworks begin, which is in childhood.
Makes sense.
But to truly understand this, without falling into self-blame, We have to completely remove the judgment we usually apply to the word control.
Oh, that's a really good point, because control has such a negative connotation.
It really does. When we hear controlling, we immediately think of a toxic boss or a manipulative partner.
Yeah, exactly.
But in early development, the urge to control is a perfectly normal, deeply biological, and honestly, a highly intelligent psychological response to an unpredictable or unsafe environment.
So it's just biology doing its job.
Precisely. Our nervous systems are ancient, and they are completely hardwired to detect and mitigate threats.
Right, our brains are basically highly evolved threat detection machines.
Exactly. Now, I want you to put that threat detection machine into the body of a young child.
Okay, picturing that.
When we are children and our environment is unpredictable, perhaps a caregiver is emotionally inconsistent, meaning they are, warm one day and terrifyingly explosive the next.
Walking on eggshells.
Yes. Or perhaps there's systemic chaos in the home, like financial terror or addiction, or simply parents who are entirely overwhelmed and emotionally unavailable.
There's just a lack of stability.
Right. When a child is embedded in that unpredictability, their nervous system sounds a relentless, blaring alarm.
Because to a child, unpredictability isn't just an inconvenience like it is for us now. It equals literal danger.
It is life or death to their nervous system.
Yeah, they don't have the cognitive resources or the emotional maturity to rationally analyze the situation.
They really don't.
Like a 7-year-old can't look at their mother and think, oh, she's having a tough time at work due to macroeconomic pressures. I should give her grace.
That is spot on. They lack the cognitive context entirely. But more importantly, they lack physical autonomy.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, they cannot pack their bags, hail a cab, and move to a healthier, more regulated environment.
Oh, right. They literally can't leave.
They are physically and evolutionarily trapped.
Yeah.
So when faced with an environment that feels emotionally precarious or physically threatening, their brilliant little brains have to figure out how to survive within it.
I have to adapt.
And what is the one single variable a child can actually attempt to control? Themselves.
Their own bodies, their own behaviors, their immediate reaction.
Yes, exactly. If a caregiver is volatile, the child internalizes that unpredictability.
Huh.
But here is the critical, really tragic twist of human development.
Okay, what is it?
A child is fundamentally egocentric. They do not think the adult is flawed.
Oh, wow.
The child thinks, if my parent is angry, I must have done something wrong to cause it. If my parent is sad, I must not be good enough to make them happy.
They internalize the external chaos as their own personal fault. That is so heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, but it is also highly adaptive.
How so?
Think about it. If the chaos is your fault, it means you have the power to fix it.
Oh, that gives them a sense of control.
Exactly. This creates what researchers call an emotional blueprint. Our earliest, most vital relationships teach us what to expect from the rest of the world and dictate what we believe we have to do to survive in it.
That makes so much sense.
If love, attention, and safety were highly conditional, the child learns that they have to constantly, vigilantly monitor the mood of the room.
Just constantly scanning.
This leads to the development of specific, deeply ingrained survival behaviors. Two of the most common and disruptive ones we see manifesting in adults are parentification and fawning.
Okay, I hear the term parentification thrown around a lot in casual conversation lately, but I want to make sure we define it with clinical clarity for the listener.
I'm glad you brought that up because it gets misused a lot.
What does parentification actually look like in practice, especially for a kid?
Parentification occurs when a child is explicitly or implicitly forced to take on adult responsibilities, very often emotional responsibilities, long before their brain is developmentally ready to handle that weight.
So it's basically role reversal.
It is role reversal. It's the 9-year-old child who becomes the primary emotional support system for a distressed, lonely, or overwhelmed parent.
That is a lot for a 9-year-old.
It is way too much. They become the sounding board. They're the ones soothing the adult, acting as the confidant about adult problems like marital strife or financial ruin.
They are essentially acting as a miniature unlicensed therapist for the person who is actually supposed to be protecting them.
That is exactly what they're doing. And even if they aren't actively counseling the parent, they might be meticulously managing their own behavior to ensure they don't add a single drop of stress to the parent's overflowing cup.
So they just try to be completely zero maintenance.
Right. They never ask for help with homework. They never complain about being sick. The child learns a devastating lesson.
What's the lesson?
That their inherent value and their physical and emotional safety lies entirely in their utility to others.
Wow.
They learn that they are only safe when they are managing someone else's emotional state.
So they become the ultimate caretaker, completely abandoning their own developmental need to just be a messy, needy kid.
Exactly.
And what about fawning? We all know fight, flight, and freeze. Where does fawning fit into that whole nervous system response?
Fawning is often called the fourth F in the trauma response repertoire.
Okay.
It is an extreme, highly evolved form of people-pleasing, but it is fundamentally a subconscious survival strategy. Fawning is the act of actively appeasing a perceived threat in order to avoid conflict and guarantee safety.
So instead of fighting the bear or running from the bear, you try to flatter the bear and make sure the bear has a really comfortable place to sit.
That is a brilliant way to put it, yes. If a child grows up in a home where anger is explosive or unpredictable, they might learn that fighting back makes the explosion worse.
Right, fighting is unsafe.
And running away isn't an option. Freezing doesn't stop the yelling.
So what works?
The only strategy that successfully mitigates the threat is to anticipate the parent's needs before they even articulate them, completely agree with everything the parent says, and entirely erase their own conflicting needs.
They just blend in.
They learn to make themselves incredibly small. They learn to shrink.
Shrinking. That word is so evocative. It paints such a specific picture of a person just trying to fold themselves up so they aren't a target.
It is entirely literal in a psychological and physiological sense.
Really? Like physical shrinking?
Yes. The child genuinely believes that taking up less space makes them safer and more lovable. And that means physical space, literally hunching over, making themselves quiet, staying out of the way.
Just trying to be invisible.
But it also means emotional and vocal space. They learn that having a need is dangerous because it might burden the caregiver. Expressing an opposing opinion is dangerous because it might spark rage. So they systematically suppress their own natural anger, they hide their sadness, and they contort their entire personality to fit into whatever precise shape the adults around them require in any given moment.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me and frankly a little terrifying.
Terrifying is a good word for it.
If we think about this in terms of technology, it's like we are running our adult lives on wildly outdated software.
Oh, absolutely.
Our internal picker for relationships, our default reactions to a slightly annoyed email, our panic when someone sighs loudly in the other room, it's all stuck in a past decade.
Stuck in version 1.0.
Yes. We grow up, we move out of the volatile house, we get impressive jobs, we buy our own groceries. But deep down in our nervous system, we are still operating on the emotional blueprint of a frightened 7-year-old.
It's so true.
We walk into a boardroom and we are still subconsciously scanning the room for threats, trying to parentify ourselves by managing the boss's mood, trying to shrink so we don't get yelled at.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and it is exactly what happens. The external environment updates.
Right.
You're an adult with agency, a bank account, and the physical ability to walk away from a bad situation.
Yeah.
But your nervous system doesn't automatically download the software patch.
There's no automatic update.
No. Unless you actively do the work to rewrite the code, your brain is still reacting to a mildly critical coworker, exactly as if you are that trapped child trying to manage a terrifying, unpredictable caregiver. The perceived stakes are just as high.
Okay, so this internal software glitch, this desperate primal need to micromanage the environment to feel safe, clearly wreaks havoc on our stress levels.
It really does.
But it doesn't just stay invisible, locked inside our heads. It bleeds out into the physical world.
It does. It becomes very tangible.
It literally alters the spaces we live in. How does this manifestation of control show up in our physical environments?
It manifests incredibly visibly and sometimes tragically in how we relate to our physical belongings. And this brings us to the deep psychology of chronic clutter and, on the more severe end of the spectrum, hoarding behaviors.
This is a heavy topic.
It is. Now, before we go a single step further, it is absolutely crucial to state this clearly. Significant clutter and hoarding are not about laziness.
Let's underscore that heavily, because the societal judgment is so intense.
So intense.
People look at a disorganized home and think, wow, that person just lacks discipline. They just don't feel like taking out the recycling.
That is a terrible, highly inaccurate, and deeply stigmatizing stereotype.
It really is unfair.
Clinically speaking, a significant difficulty discarding possessions stems from very complex information processing deficits in the brain, coupled with profound, overwhelming emotional attachments.
So it's literally a brain processing thing.
We have to look at the neuroscience to truly understand the sheer effort it takes for these individuals to make a choice.
What does the data show?
There is fascinating neurological data showing how the brains of individuals who struggle with severe clutter operate fundamentally differently, specifically in a network of the brain called the salience network.
The salience network. Okay, I need an ELI 5, explain like I'm 5 for that. What exactly does the salience network do in a typical brain?
Think of the salience network as your brain's internal sorting facility and spotlight operator.
Okay, sorting and spotlighting.
Its job is to constantly scan your environment and determine the relevance, importance, or urgency of an object or a situation.
Give me an example.
If you were walking down the street and see a colorful leaf, your salience network says, pretty but low importance.
Great, keep walking.
But if you see a car speeding toward you, your salience network shines a massive urgent spotlight on it and screams, high importance, move!
Okay, so it filters out the noise and tells us what actually requires our attention and energy.
Exactly. What clinical research has observed is that in individuals with hoarding challenges, this specific part of the brain operates atypically.
Yep.
When they are at rest, not being asked to do anything, their salience network is actually underengaged compared to a typical brain.
Really underengaged.
Yes. But, and here's the fascinating part, the moment they are asked to make a decision about a physical object, even a seemingly trivial one, that network becomes wildly, overwhelmingly overengaged.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I am wrapping my head around this.
Go ahead.
If I pick up a piece of junk mail, like a flyer for a local pizza place, my salience network barely registers it.
Right.
It says, trash, zero importance, and I toss it in the bin without a second thought. But for someone struggling with this, deciding to throw away that same pizza flyer causes their brain to light up like a pinball machine.
Yes, exactly. Their brain is suddenly assigning a massive, disproportionate amount of significance, potential value, and severe potential risk to the act of discarding that flyer.
Over a pizza flyer.
It is not a minor chore for them.
Yeah.
It is experienced neurologically as a monumental, high-stakes decision.
What is their brain telling them?
The brain is shouting, wait, what if we need this coupon? What if this has important local information? Discarding this is a critical error.
Oh, wow.
This neurological overengagement leads to the clinical reality of the behavior, which researchers generally define by 4 specific criteria.
Let's walk through those 4 criteria carefully so we have a solid understanding of the reality of this experience rather than just, the reality TV version of it.
That's a great approach. The first criterion is a persistent, ongoing difficulty discarding or parting with belongings. And this is completely regardless of their actual monetary value.
Right.
We aren't talking about hoarding gold bars. We are talking about old magazines, broken electronics, worn-out clothing, or random pieces of string.
Because to their salience network, the string holds as much potential weight as the gold bar.
Exactly. The second criterion explains the why. This difficulty is due to a deeply perceived need to save the items, coupled with the profound emotional distress associated with discarding them.
It's not just a preference to keep it. It physically and emotionally hurts to let it go. It causes a spike in anxiety.
Profound distress. It feels like a threat to their safety. The third criterion is where it becomes visibly impactful.
Okay, what is it?
This accumulation of possessions results in clutter that fills up active living areas and substantially compromises their intended use.
So a dining room table is no longer a place to eat meals. It becomes a structural foundation for stacks of paperwork.
Yes.
A bed is no longer for sleeping. It's a flat surface for storing clothes, and the person ends up sleeping on a small corner of the couch.
Precisely. The spaces lose their functional purpose.
Oh.
And the fourth criterion is that this accumulation causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning.
It isolates the person.
Yes, it deeply isolates them. They stop inviting friends over because of the shame. Sometimes landlords get involved. It deeply impacts their quality of life.
And when you trace it all the way back, it loops right back to our core theme: control.
It really does.
They are desperately trying to control their environment and secure their safety by holding on to things. But in a tragic twist of irony, the things end up completely controlling them.
It's a very painful paradox.
Now, to help us understand what exactly they are thinking when they look at these items, clinical observations highlight 3 specific belief pillars that support and maintain this behavior.
Yes, these pillars are crucial to understand.
Let's really dig into these, starting with the first one: opportunity.
The belief in opportunity is fascinating because it is rooted in optimism, in a way.
Optimism, how so?
It means that to the individual, An item isn't just an inanimate object. It is a physical representation of hope, potential, and endless possibilities.
Okay, paint a picture for me.
Imagine a stack of unread newspapers from 3 years ago. To you or me, that is recycling.
Right.
To someone anchored by the opportunity belief that my stack is a wealth of knowledge they simply haven't had the time to tap into yet?
So if they throw it away, they aren't just throwing away old paper. They are throwing away the opportunity to learn, to be an informed citizen, to discover a recipe that could change their life.
Exactly.
It is a physical manifestation of potential.
Yes. Or think about craft supplies. Bags and bags of yarn or wood scraps. Throwing them away means throwing away the potential to create something beautiful.
Right.
It feels like killing a future opportunity.
It's like FOMO, the fear of missing out, but completely weaponized by your own belongings.
That is a great way to describe it.
You are terrified of missing out on the potential value of the object. What about the second pillar? Responsibility and morality. I have to admit, when I was reading through the research, this one hit me hard.
It hits a lot of people hard.
I think a lot of people who don't clinically hoard still struggle with this one.
Absolutely. This is an incredibly powerful and paralyzing pillar. It is the deeply held belief that you are morally obligated to care for your objects.
Like taking care of them.
It is the fear of being wasteful, but taken to a crippling, debilitating extreme. The classic, highly relatable example is keeping a broken appliance. Let's say you have a blender.
Okay.
The motor burned out 5 years ago. It is completely useless.
Oh, I know this exact feeling. You look at the broken blender and putting it in the trash just feels fundamentally morally wrong.
It feels awful.
It feels like a crime against the environment.
Exactly. You believe you must fix it. You tell yourself you will watch a tutorial and repair the motor.
Even though you've never repaired a motor in your life.
Right. Or, if you can't fix it, you believe you must find the absolute perfect, most environmentally responsible, ethically flawless way to dispose of it.
Right.
Or you must find the perfect person who specifically needs the spare parts of a 2014 blender.
And because those perfect conditions are almost impossible to meet, because finding a blender part scavenger takes massive effort, the easiest thing to do is just push it to the back of the cabinet and ignore it.
And it stays there for a decade. The individual feels an overwhelming, almost parental sense of responsibility for the life and the destiny of the object.
Parental responsibility for a blender.
Throwing it unceremoniously into a landfill feels like a profound moral failure. It triggers intense guilt.
Wow.
So, to avoid the guilt, to control their internal emotional state, they keep the broken object.
That is so incredibly illuminating. We are keeping trash to avoid feeling like a bad person.
That's the core of it.
And the third pillar is identity.
Identity is perhaps the most emotionally raw pillar. This is the deep-seated fear that discarding an object means discarding a piece of your own soul, your history, or your aspirational self.
That sounds intense.
Let's go back to the craft supplies. If you have a box of half-finished knitting projects that you haven't touched since the phase you went through 10 years ago, throwing them away isn't just clearing space.
Right. It's more than that.
It might feel like you are actively betraying the part of yourself that identifies as creative, crafty, or artistic.
Or old college textbooks. People drag heavy boxes of textbooks from apartment to apartment for 20 years.
They absolutely do.
They will never read a 101 level biology textbook again, but getting rid of it feels like losing your identity as an intellectual or an educated person. The objects serve as external, tangible proof of who you are.
Precisely. The objects are tethered to their ego and their sense of self-worth. If the object goes, they fear that part of them ceases to exist.
So if we look at the big picture here, what does this all mean? Are these objects essentially becoming emotional hostages?
That's an interesting way to phrase it.
Like we are keeping them trapped in our homes, filling up our living spaces because our nervous systems are utterly terrified of the emotional fallout.
The guilt, the lost potential, the loss of identity.
Exactly, the fallout of letting them go.
Emotional hostages is a very dark but very apt way to describe the dynamic. You are desperately trying to control your internal anxiety and maintain a sense of safety by maintaining absolute rigid control over your external possessions.
But it doesn't work.
No. The tragedy of this strategy is that it backfires spectacularly. The sheer volume of possessions eventually creates physical chaos.
Which creates more anxiety.
Exactly. The chaos generates immense shame and more anxiety, which creates a devastating, self-perpetuating feedback loop.
Which brings us to a fascinating pivot in our deep dive. Because if we zoom out, This desperate need to hoard things, to feel safe, to avoid negative emotions. We don't just do it with physical stuff.
We certainly do not.
We apply this exact same hoarding mentality, this exact same mechanism of control to our social lives, our personalities, and our behaviors.
We absolutely do. The underlying psychological architecture is identical.
How so?
Just as we hoard objects to protect ourselves from the perceived danger of missing out or losing our identity, we hoard perfect behaviors.
Our fixed behaviors.
Yes, we collect flawless interactions, impeccable work presentations, and unshakable pleasantness to protect ourselves from social judgment and the agonizing pain of shame.
So it's all defensive.
This is the foundational root of toxic perfectionism.
Let's talk about shame, because it is the engine driving this particular train. It's a heavy, visceral word.
It is the heaviest word.
Clinical researchers have obviously done incredible work in the zeitgeist about this, but looking at our materials today, they outline 4 highly specific, shame-based core beliefs that drive this relentless perfectionism.
Yes.
Let's unpack each of these, because they operate like a hidden virus in the brain.
Shame is absolutely the foundation. It is vital to distinguish it from guilt.
Okay, what's the difference?
Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad.
Oh, that's a huge distinction.
It is the deep-seated, unshakable feeling that you are fundamentally flawed and inherently unworthy of love and belonging. The 4 core beliefs operate exactly like a hostile operating system running in the background of your mind.
What's the first one?
The first core belief is deficiency.
Deficiency, meaning there is a missing piece.
Yes, it is the internalized belief that something is inherently, unfixably wrong with you. You are defective at your core.
It's so sad.
You look around at other people and genuinely believe they possess some secret manual for life, some inherent goodness that you were simply born without.
Like everyone else got the memo but you.
You believe you are simply not good enough, and nothing you do can ever fully compensate for that foundational flaw.
That is a brutally heavy thing to carry around all day, and it directly feeds into the second core belief, personalization.
Personalization is the distorted lens through which you view the world.
Okay, how does it distort things?
Because you believe you are fundamentally deficient. Personalization means that whenever you experience rejection, criticism, a setback, or even just mere neutrality from someone else, you immediately and reflexively interpret it as undeniable proof of your deficiency.
Give me a real-world hypothetical of how personalization distorts a normal interaction.
Let's say you text a friend to ask if they want to get dinner. The friend doesn't text back for 24 hours.
Happens all the time.
A person without this shame-based belief might think, oh, they must be swamped at work, or they probably forgot their phone.
Right, logical reasons.
But if you are operating on personalization, your brain instantly skips over all logical external factors and internalizes it.
What does the brain say?
They didn't text back because I am annoying. They don't actually like me. They are finally realizing how deficient I am, and they are abandoning me.
Whoa.
Everything in the external world becomes a direct referendum on your personal worth.
That sounds absolutely exhausting. You are constantly on trial, and you are always the defendant.
You truly are.
Which leads to the third belief, which is perfectionism itself, but used as a defensive shield.
Exactly. Perfectionism in this context is not a healthy striving for excellence.
No.
It is a trauma response. It is the belief that any mistake, any flaw in your physical appearance, any typo in an email, or any awkward sentence in a conversation will instantly reveal your hidden deficiency to the world.
And if the world sees it?
And if the world sees your deficiency, the result will be catastrophic rejection and abandonment. Therefore, logic dictates that you must be utterly flawless just to survive and maintain your relationships.
You have to earn your right to exist in the room by being perfect.
Yes.
And the final core belief that locks this all into place is suspiciousness.
Suspiciousness is the ultimate barrier to intimacy. It is the ingrained belief that other people simply cannot be trusted with your vulnerability.
Because they'll use it against you.
You believe that if others get close enough to see the real you, if they see your flaws, your fears, your deficiencies, they will inevitably exploit them, judge you harshly, and ultimately hurt you.
So you can't ever let your guard down.
Therefore, you must keep your guard up at all times and perfectly meticulously manage how everyone perceives you. You become a PR manager for your own personality.
This combination creates what is described in the research as the not enough cycle.
It's a vicious cycle.
We push ourselves to impossible, agonizing standards because we genuinely deep down believe that love, attention, and safety aren't inherent rights.
We think they must be earned.
They aren't given freely, they are transactional, they must be aggressively earned through absolute flawlessness.
Right.
The internal monologue is like, if I am the perfect employee who never logs off, the perfect friend who is always available, the perfect partner who never has a bad mood, then no one can find a reason to abandon me.
It is a profoundly exhausting way to live because it requires constant vigilance. You are never off the clock.
That's so true.
And this relentless pressure forces us into a psychological fracturing. In order to maintain this perfect facade, we have to split ourselves into pieces.
Which brings us to a really fascinating therapeutic framework known as parts work.
Yes, parts work is incredibly insightful here.
I loved this concept when I was reading through the material. Explain parts work to us, because the visual metaphor of this really stuck with me.
Parts work suggests that our human psyche isn't just one single, monolithic, perfectly unified entity.
Okay.
Instead, our personality is made up of different parts or sub-personalities, all with their own emotions, memories, and motivations.
Like we have different modes we operate in.
It is perfectly normal. You have a professional part, a playful part, a parenting part. But when we are driven by intense shame and perfectionism, we start rigidly categorizing these parts into acceptable and unacceptable.
We start playing favorites with our own personality.
Exactly. Let's say, due to your childhood blueprint, you learn that expressing anger or neediness resulted in punishment.
Right.
Now, as an adult, you still have a part of yourself that is highly emotional, perhaps a bit spontaneous, or maybe carries the unhealed pain and reactivity of your teenage years. Let's personify it and call it the messy emotional teenager part.
And because our survival strategy demands absolute perfection and compliance, we realize we absolutely cannot let the boss or the spouse or the friends see that messy teenager part.
That part is deemed completely unacceptable for public viewing. It is a liability to your safety.
So what do?
You try to lock that part away in a dark back room of your mind. You actively suppress it.
Just shove it in the closet?
You think, if anyone sees how needy or how angry or how exhausted I really am underneath this smile, they will be disgusted and they will leave.
Wow.
So you expend massive amounts of psychological energy standing guard at the door of that back room, ensuring that you only ever present the highly controlled, polished, accommodating parts of yourself to the world.
I'm going to use an analogy here because it's just so vivid.
Please do.
It sounds like perfectionism is essentially spending your entire life building a magnificent, heavily fortified castle to keep out the bad guys.
The critics, the people who might reject you.
Exactly. But you build the walls so high and the iron gates so thick that you end up trapping yourself inside.
Yes.
You are entirely alone in there, wandering the halls, because absolutely no one is allowed to cross the moat and see the real you.
That is a beautiful, evocative, and deeply tragic analogy.
Yes.
And it is incredibly accurate.
It's so sad.
You are safe from external criticism, perhaps. You never get fired.
Yeah.
You never ruffle feathers.
Right.
But you are entirely, devastatingly starved of authentic human connection.
Because no one knows the real you.
You cannot be truly loved if you are never truly seen. You are isolated behind your own sophisticated defenses.
Which naturally leads us to ask the next big question. If I am sitting inside this heavily armored fortress, constantly and meticulously managing how others see me to ensure they never get mad at me,
Right.
how does that affect the actual people standing outside the moat? How does this impact our friends, our partners, our colleagues?
It impacts them profoundly.
This drops us into one of the most challenging concepts in today's deep dive, the empathy trap and the illusion of false responsibility.
This is usually the part of the framework where people feel the most initial resistance.
Why is that?
Because we have to challenge and dismantle some very deeply held, culturally celebrated beliefs about what it actually means to be a good, caring person.
We do love a martyr in our culture.
We live in a society that often deeply confuses genuine responsibility with toxic, controlling guilt.
Let's draw a hard, bright line between those two concepts. What is the actual difference between taking responsibility and feeling toxic guilt?
Genuine responsibility is grounded in reality and autonomy. It means taking clear ownership of your own actions, your own choices, your own words, and your own reactions.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you make a commitment, you break it, you are responsible for that action. You own it, you apologize sincerely, and you make amends.
That's just being an adult.
Right. Guilt, however, specifically the toxic, chronic guilt associated with perfectionism and people-pleasing, is a cognitive distortion.
A distortion.
It is a mental trap based on the false, grandiose belief that you are entirely responsible for and have the power to control another autonomous human being's emotional state.
So it's the belief that I have the superpower to make you happy or make you sad.
Precisely. And it is a fallacy. You
Yeah.
cannot make someone feel anything.
You can't.
No. Emotion is an internal process based on their own perceptions, blueprints, and nervous system. Here is a stark example. Let's say you have to deliver some bad news to a friend. Maybe telling them you can't attend their destination wedding because you can't afford it.
Oh, that's a tough conversation.
If you deliver that news respectfully, honestly, and with care, and the other person is absolutely devastated and angry, you are responsible for the respectful delivery. You are not responsible for their devastation.
Wow. Their reaction is their own.
Their disappointment is theirs to process.
Hmm?
But when we are trapped in the people-pleasing trauma response, we immediately absorb their devastation as our own personal failure.
We take it all on.
We think, if I was just a better friend, if I was wealthier, if I tried harder, they wouldn't be sad. I have failed.
Which means we are taking on a burden we were never meant to carry. And this leads to a psychological mechanism that is, honestly, a really hard truth to swallow.
It is very difficult for a lot of people to hear.
When I first read this in the research, I felt actively defensive. It's the idea that chronic people-pleasing, constantly bending over backward and over-apologizing, it's not actually about being a nice, selfless person.
No, it is not. At its core, chronic people-pleasing is a subconscious manipulation tactic.
Ouch. Okay, you have to unpack that immediately because nobody listening right now wants to hear that they are manipulating their loved ones by apologizing too much. It feels counterintuitive.
I know it stings deeply, and I say it with profound compassion, not judgment. But we have to look objectively at the mechanism of action.
Okay, let's look at the mechanism.
When you over-apologize for something that isn't your fault, or when you completely abandon your own needs to keep someone else happy, even when it actively harms you, what are you actually doing in that moment?
I thought I was just being nice.
You are trying to micromanage their mood. You're trying to engineer their emotional state.
Engineer their state.
And why are you doing that? Because their potential displeasure, their sigh, their frown makes you feel incredibly anxious and unsafe.
Wow, oh my gosh.
You are trying to control their reaction so that you don't have to feel the deep, terrifying discomfort of conflict, disapproval, or rejection.
It's totally self-serving. The action looks incredibly selfless and accommodating on the surface, but the underlying motivation is entirely self-protective. You are manipulating the external environment, their mood, to soothe your own dysregulated nervous system.
Mind blown. Seriously, let me process this.
They second.
So when I'm in a meeting and I express this slightly differing opinion and I immediately follow it up with, but I'm so sorry, I know that's probably a dumb idea, whatever you guys think is fine.
Yes.
I am not being polite or deferential. I am preemptively trying to neutralize any potential annoyance they might feel so I don't have to sit with the anxiety of someone disagreeing with me.
You've got it.
I am trying to manage their emotions to protect myself from my own shame.
Exactly. You are trying to control the uncontrollable other people's perceptions of you. And this complete lack of emotional boundaries inevitably leads to a state of emotional enmeshment and codependency.
Let's define enmeshment for the listener. What does it feel like to be enmeshed? Enmeshment occurs when the psychological boundaries between two individuals become so porous and blurred that you literally cannot tell where your emotions end and the other person's emotions begin.
You just bleed into each other.
You lose your individual outline. If your partner comes home and they had a terrible, frustrating day at work, you don't just feel supportive empathy for them. Your entire evening is ruined.
You catch their bad mood like a cold.
You absorb their dark mood entirely. Your nervous system matches theirs. If they're stressed, you are panicked. If they're angry, you are walking on eggshells.
And people think this is a good thing.
This is very often culturally praised and labeled as being highly empathetic or a true empath, but it is actually a state of toxic empathy.
Toxic empathy. That feels like an oxymoron because we are taught that empathy is the ultimate moral good.
Healthy empathy is wonderful. Healthy empathy is the ability to understand, validate, and share the feelings of another person while strictly maintaining your own separate, grounded sense of self.
So what's the difference in practice?
I can see you are drowning in a river, and I can throw you a life preserver and offer you warmth. Toxic empathy is jumping into the raging river with you, forgetting how to swim, and drowning alongside you.
Oh, wow, that is such a clear image.
It strips you of your individual agency
Yeah.
and leaves you completely at the mercy of the fluctuating moods of everyone in your vicinity.
I am going to throw out another analogy. If we constantly light ourselves on fire to keep other people warm, aren't we eventually just leaving them with a pile of useless ashes?
Yes.
Like, eventually there is absolutely nothing left of us to give. We are just burned out husks.
That is the inevitable biological outcome. You burn out completely. Because carrying the emotional baggage of everyone around you, trying to micromanage the feelings of an entire office or an entire family, is an impossible, unsustainable burden.
We just aren't built for it.
The human body and mind simply cannot maintain that level of hypervigilance.
So what happens when we inevitably reach that breaking point? What happens when this massive, elaborate control system we've built?
The hoarding, the perfectionism.
Exactly. The hoarding of objects to feel safe. The hoarding of perfect behaviors to avoid shame. The exhausting people-pleasing to manage everyone's moods. What happens when that finally cracks under the sheer psychological pressure?
That brings us to a fascinating area of psychology. The mind's defense mechanisms.
Defenses.
When the system cracks, when the anxiety of trying to control the inherently uncontrollable universe becomes too much to bear, the mind has to protect itself from a complete collapse.
How does it do that?
It does this by deploying sophisticated defense mechanisms, which usually result in numbing out, disconnecting from reality, or altering our perception of the threat.
Give us some concrete examples of these defenses in action. I know there are dozens, but the clinical materials highlighted a few specific ones that seem incredibly common.
There are many, formulated originally by psychoanalytic theory, but still highly relevant today. Three very common ones we see in high-functioning anxious individuals are regression, displacement, and intellectualization.
Let's start with regression. I feel like this one universally happens to everyone around the holidays when they visit their childhood homes.
It absolutely does, and it's a perfect example. Regression is the act of unconsciously reverting to an earlier, more childlike, less mature stage of psychological development when faced with unacceptable levels of stress.
So you just act like a kid.
Imagine you are a highly successful, independent, 35-year-old adult. You manage a team, you pay a mortgage, but you go back to your childhood home for a holiday dinner.
Okay, setting the scene.
The old family dynamics, the subtle criticisms from a parent, trigger your deeply buried childhood anxieties. The stress feels unmanageable to your adult brain. So your mind retreats to an older, highly familiar coping strategy.
And suddenly you're a teenager again.
Suddenly you are acting exactly like a petulant, moody 15-year-old. You are slamming doors, you are sulking at the dinner table, you are throwing a minor tantrum.
Your brain basically reboots in safe mode, but it's the 2005 version of the software.
Exactly. It's a retreat to a time when you didn't have to be responsible for processing complex adult emotions. And then we have displacement.
Displacement, what does that look like?
Displacement is the act of taking your intense emotional reaction to a highly threatening situation and unconsciously redirecting it onto a safer, significantly less threatening target.
Okay, give me an example of that.
The classic textbook example is having a terrible, humiliating day at work where your boss unfairly belittles you in a meeting. You are filled with rage,
Right.
but you cannot yell at your boss because you need your paycheck. The boss is an unsafe target. So you completely suppress that anger, you drive home in silence, you walk through the front door, and you immediately start screaming at your spouse because they left a water glass on the coffee table.
You displaced the danger. The water glass didn't cause the rage, it was just the safe outlet for it.
Yes. You can yell at your spouse because you subconsciously trust that they won't fire you or abandon you over a water glass. You safely discharge the energy, but you cause collateral damage to your relationship in the process.
And what about intellectualization? I suspect a lot of our listeners, people who love diving deep into research and sources, might heavily rely on this one to cope.
I would agree. Intellectualization is the defense mechanism of overthinking. It is the act of retreating into cold facts, abstract logic, and academic concepts in order to completely avoid feeling visceral, uncomfortable emotions.
Give me a hypothetical for that one.
Let's say you go through a devastating breakup. Instead of allowing yourself to cry, to feel the deep, agonizing grief and rejection in your body, you immediately jump onto the internet.
And start Googling.
You spend 6 hours a day researching attachment theory. You analyze the exact psychological attachment styles of you and your ex. You create a mental spreadsheet of why the relationship was statistically doomed to fail based on childhood trauma models.
You sound incredibly self-aware when you talk to your friends about it.
But you aren't actually feeling anything. You are just thinking about your feelings instead of feeling them.
Exactly. You are analyzing the grief from a balcony, observing it as an abstract concept, rather than sitting in the room with it. It keeps the raw, messy pain safely at arm's length.
Which brings up the specific emotion that we are often the most terrified to actually feel in our bodies, and the one we work the absolute hardest to avoid, suppress, or intellectualize away.
Anger.
Yes, anger. We touched on this earlier, but the clinical material completely reframes anger. It shifts it from a toxic flaw to a necessary tool.
It is a vital paradigm shift. We are culturally deeply conditioned to view anger as a toxic, inherently bad, or destructive emotion.
We are constantly told to calm down, be the bigger person, let it go, choose peace.
Right.
But from a clinical psychological perspective, healthy anger is an incredibly vital biological protective emotion. It is your body's internal warning system.
A warning system for what, specifically?
For when a boundary has been crossed, anger naturally arises when someone has disrespected you, taken advantage of you, or violated your fundamental sense of physical or emotional safety or fairness.
So it's actually useful.
It is the emotion that provides the sudden surge of biological energy required to stand up, put your hand out, and say, "No, stop. This is not acceptable." It is the energy of self-advocacy.
But because we have been meticulously trained to be perfect people pleasers, and because we are terrified of conflict, we don't say no. We swallow the anger.
We push it down.
What physically and psychologically happens to all that suppressed anger?
Emotional energy doesn't just evaporate because you refuse to acknowledge it. It is trapped in the body.
It has to go somewhere.
If you absolutely refuse to express anger outward to the person who wronged you, because your fawning trauma response tells you conflict equals death, you have no choice but to turn that anger inward upon yourself.
Oh, that sounds so damaging.
Suppressed anger morphs into severe self-criticism, chronic depression, unexplained physical fatigue, and intense self-sabotage. You start attacking your own self-worth because you are simply too afraid to address the external person who actually crossed your boundary.
You become your own worst enemy because it's safer than making someone else your enemy. And this brings us to another fascinating way we try to protect ourselves from being hurt or let down by others, which is through a behavior known as toxic independence.
Toxic independence is a highly sophisticated, deeply isolating defense mechanism.
What is it exactly?
It is the absolute, rigid refusal to ask for help, to delegate, or to rely on anyone else for emotional or physical support.
Our culture often disguises this as a virtue.
It does. It sounds like strength, right?
Yeah.
I am a rock. I can
Well,
do it all myself. I don't need anyone. But clinically, it is almost always born of deep, unhealed fear.
what is the underlying fear driving it?
The subconscious logic is a protective formula. When I relied on people in the past, they failed me, they judged me, or they made me feel like a burden.
Right.
Therefore, if I never ever rely on anyone again, no one can ever disappoint me, no one can ever abandon me, and no one can ever reject me.
Wow.
It is an attempt to control the variables of relationships by simply removing the other person from the equation.
I want to introduce an analogy here because this concept is so powerful. Toxic independence feels exactly like an autoimmune disorder.
Oh, that's a very good comparison.
Right. In a physical autoimmune disease, your body's defense system, your immune system, becomes so hyperactive and paranoid in its attempt to protect you from foreign invaders that it gets confused.
It starts attacking healthy cells.
It starts aggressively attacking your own perfectly healthy tissue and organs. Toxic independence is your emotional defense system doing the exact same thing.
Yes, exactly.
It is so desperate to protect you from the possibility of a bad relationship that it starts attacking your own healthy, loving relationships. A loving partner offers to help you with a problem, and your defense system flags them as a threat to your autonomy and pushes them away.
It isolates you.
By refusing to let anyone in to help you, you end up profoundly physically and emotionally isolated.
That is a brilliant and incredibly accurate comparison. The autoimmune response destroys the body to save it. The toxic independence response destroys the social support network to save the ego.
It's so tragic.
In trying to perfectly guarantee your protection from the possibility of emotional pain, You inadvertently guarantee the absolute certainty of loneliness.
Okay, this is a lot. We have painted a very vivid, slightly intimidating picture of how we get trapped in these cycles.
It can feel overwhelming to realize it.
If we are hoarding our physical stuff to avoid guilt, if we are hoarding perfect behaviors to avoid shame, if we are manipulating people with apologies and pushing everyone away with toxic independence just to stay safe, how do we actually fix this?
That's the million-dollar question.
How do we rewire this outdated, glitchy software in our nervous systems?
That is the most important part of this entire discussion, and it takes us into the final phase. Forging a path forward. To rewire the brain, we cannot just try to think happier thoughts.
Right. Positive thinking isn't enough.
We have to fundamentally shift our entire psychological framework. We have to move away from a behavior known as experiential avoidance and consciously move toward values-based action.
Let's define the terms. Experiential avoidance. That sounds like a very academic way of saying running away from bad feelings.
That is exactly what it is, but it operates on a massive scale. Experiential avoidance is the continuous, rigid attempt to control, alter, or completely avoid internal experiences.
Like what kind of experiences?
This includes uncomfortable thoughts, heavy feelings, unpleasant bodily sensations, or painful memories. And the key is that we do this even when doing so causes us long-term behavioral harm.
So everything we've talked about today is experiential avoidance. Hoarding broken blenders to avoid the guilt of wastefulness is experiential avoidance.
Yes.
Biting your tongue and people-pleasing a toxic boss to avoid the anxiety of conflict is experiential avoidance.
Precisely. We are organizing our entire lives around the goal of not feeling bad. And it shrinks our lives down to a very small, very controlled box.
Let me just shrink.
To break out of the box, we have to stop making our life choices based on trying to avoid negative feelings and instead make choices based on our core values.
But we need to clarify the difference between a value and a goal, because they are often used interchangeably and they absolutely aren't the same thing.
They are fundamentally different, and confusing them leads to a lot of frustration. A goal is a specific, measurable, achievable landmark.
Give me some examples of a goal.
I want to clean out my garage this weekend is a goal. I want to get a promotion to senior manager by next year is a goal. I want to lose 10 pounds. Once you achieve a goal, you check it off a list and it is done.
Okay, and a value.
A value, however, is a direction you travel. It is a fundamental way of being in the world.
The classic metaphor here is heading east, right?
Exactly like heading east. You can travel east for your entire life. You can drive east, fly east, walk east, but you will never, ever arrive at a final destination called east where you can sit down and say, I'm done.
You just keep going east.
It simply guides your journey. A value is something like, I value being a patient, present parent, or I value living in an organized, peaceful, welcoming space, or I value authentic, honest connection with my friends.
They are just guiding principles.
You can never check those off a list and say, I completed patience today, I don't have to do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
They inform how you choose to behave in every single given moment.
Okay, so let's put this into practice. When the anxiety inevitably flares up, let's say you finally go to the cabinet, you grab that broken blender, you walk to the trash can, and suddenly your brain starts screaming, no, stop, that's wasteful, you are a bad person.
It'll definitely scream that.
How do you handle that sticky, terrible thought without instantly engaging in experiential avoidance and putting the blender back?
You practice a technique from acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. You practice treating your emotions as guests.
Treating them as guests.
Right now, when a bad feeling like guilt or panic shows up, your default reaction is probably to fight it. You argue with it, you try to suppress it, or you lock the door.
Right.
But psychologically, fighting a feeling just gives it more energy and validity. Instead, I want you to imagine your mind as a dinner party, and these uncomfortable emotions, anxiety, shame, guilt, are annoying, uninvited guests who just walk through the front door.
Oh, I know those specific guests very well. They show up unannounced, they drink all the good wine, they complain loudly, and they ruin the vibe.
Right. Now, you have a choice. You can spend the entire dinner party standing by the door, actively trying to physically shove them out, yelling at them to leave.
Which is exhausting.
If you do that, you are entirely focused on them. You miss the party, you don't eat, you don't talk to your friends. The annoying guests have completely controlled your evening.
Right.
Or you can use a different strategy. You could simply acknowledge them. You look at them and say, oh, hello, anxiety. I see you're here tonight. Hello, guilt. You acknowledge their presence. You let them exist in the corner of the room, but you absolutely do not let them DJ the event.
I love that. You do not let them pick the music. You don't let them dictate your actions.
Precisely. You feel the anxiety of throwing away the blender. You allow the guilt to wash over you. It feels uncomfortable. But you choose to open the trash can and throw it away anyway, because throwing it away aligns with your chosen value of having a peaceful, functional home.
You feel it, but do the action anyway.
You let the feeling exist, but you let the value dictate the physical action.
So instead of letting our immediate hunger choose our food, which usually results in eating a whole cake, we let our long-term values choose our actions. We feel the terrible feeling, but we do the valued action anyway.
Exactly.
But let's be realistic. How do we bridge the massive gap between this big, lofty, theoretical value of living peacefully and actually getting off the couch to do the scary, difficult thing?
By breaking it down, using SMART goals, and utilizing what behavioral psychologists call the power of the appointment.
Smart goals.
You cannot just wake up and say to yourself, I am going to be better at setting boundaries today. That is way too vague, it's overwhelming, and your brain will instantly panic and paralyze you.
You need something actionable.
You need SMART goals. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based.
Give us a highly specific example of a SMART goal for someone trying to break out of the fawning, people-pleasing trauma response at work.
A poor, unhelpful goal is, I will stop over-apologizing so much. A SMART goal is, for the next 3 days, that makes it time-based. I will not use the word sorry when someone physically bumps into me at the coffee machine or when I am simply asking a clarifying question in a meeting.
That is so specific.
That is specific and measurable. This is highly achievable because it is a small, bounded time frame, and it is relevant to my overarching value of taking up rightful, confident space in my professional life.
And what do you mean by the power of the appointment?
We all know human nature. If we make a firm dentist appointment for Tuesday at 10 a.m., we show up. We arrange our day around it.
True.
But if we just look in a mirror and say, I really should get my teeth checked eventually, a year goes by and we never do it. The power of the appointment is simply setting a firm, external, undeniable deadline for your behavioral change.
How does that work for clutter?
Let's go back to the clutter. Don't say, I need to clean the house. Say, I am going to take one single black trash bag of donations to the charity center on Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. Shrink the timeline. Make the goal incredibly small. Don't worry about the rest of the house. Just focus exclusively on Thursday at 4 p.m.
Okay, but here is the reality of the anxious brain. What happens when it is Thursday at 3:55 p.m., the bag is in the car, and your brain inevitably tries to talk you out of it by generating a massive, overwhelming storm of catastrophic anxiety?
Oh, it will happen.
Like, what if I need these clothes? I'm making a huge mistake.
That is the moment of truth.
Yeah.
And that is when you deploy a classic cognitive behavioral tool called checking the facts.
Checking the facts.
When the emotional storm hits, your brain's threat detection system will start spinning wild, dramatic narratives. If I donate these clothes, I am actively erasing my past. I will regret it forever. I won't have anything to wear if I lose weight. I am a terrible, wasteful person.
It's just a spiral.
Checking the facts means forcing yourself to step back, take a breath, and ruthlessly strip away all the emotional narrative and adjectives to find the raw, objective, boring facts of the situation.
Just the cold data, like a scientist observing a rock.
Just the data. You say out loud, fact, these are 3 cotton shirts. Fact, I have not put these shirts on my body in 4 full years. Fact, they currently occupy a specific cubic foot of space in my closet. Fact, I am transporting them to a building. Wow. Notice there are no words like regret, wasteful, or identity in those facts. When you actively reduce the terrifying situation to objective, observable facts, it rapidly lowers the emotional temperature in your nervous system.
It calms you down.
It de-escalates the threat, which allows you to proceed with your value-based action of dropping the bag off.
Okay, I want to take a breath, step back, and look at this massive, intricate psychological landscape we've just covered over the last hour. We've gone from staring at a messy kitchen counter to unpacking the depths of childhood trauma, understanding the neuroscience of the salience network, exploring the defensive fortresses of perfectionism, and learning how to treat our deepest feels like annoying party guests.
It's a lot to process.
And the profound takeaway here is that whether you are trying to finally clean out a garage that has been packed full for a decade, or you were trying to stop saying sorry for simply existing and taking up space at your job, or you were trying to let go of a toxic, enmeshed relationship that you keep desperately clinging to, the root of the work is the exact same.
It all comes back to the same thing.
It is all fundamentally about learning to slowly, bravely release the illusion of control. We suffer so deeply because we believe that if we just perfectly micromanage our physical stuff, if we meticulously script our words, and if we constantly manipulate other people's feelings, we will finally magically feel safe from the unpredictable world. But true safety doesn't come from building a perfect, impenetrable fortress.
It truly doesn't. The fortress just becomes a prison.
And doing this work,
Yeah.
actually throwing away the physical object, actually setting the boundary and letting the other person be briefly mad at you without immediately trying to fix it is incredibly, viscerally uncomfortable. I want to deeply validate that for you listening right now. If you try this tomorrow, it is going to feel awful at first. Your alarms will ring.
They absolutely will.
But pushing through that discomfort, treating those bad feelings like uninvited guests, but taking the action anyway, is the absolute only way to build a life that is genuinely, authentically yours, instead of living a life built entirely on a terrified reaction to the past.
Absolutely beautifully said. And I want to leave the listener with this final, perhaps slightly provocative thought to carry with them.
Please do.
We expend so much precious life energy trying to architect the perfect, unshakable, perfectly controlled environment. We try to control our homes, our reputations, and our families. But true psychological safety in life isn't found in perfectly controlling your surroundings or the people in it. Because the hard truth is, the world will always be somewhat chaotic and unpredictable.
That's a scary truth.
You cannot control the economy, you cannot control other people's perceptions, and you cannot control the future. True safety is finally doing the work to trust yourself enough to know that no matter how messy or unpredictable life gets, you possess the internal tools, the resilience, and the inherent worth to handle it. You do not need to control the storm, you just need to trust your own anchor.
You don't need to control the storm, you just need to trust your own anchor. That is a phenomenal place to end. Think about that the next time you look at that intimidating pile of mail, or when you catch your fingers typing out a perfectly pleasing, overly apologetic email. Let the storm blow and trust your anchor. We will see you on the next deep dive.